Always good to see everybody. This is our monthly Wealth Building Wednesday call that the Greater Pennsylvania region hosts. So thanks for joining us. It looks like some of you might be joining for the first time, and I do see some repeat people coming back. So welcome, welcome. We've got a pretty cool call today. I know Culin has a lot of information to go over. But before we get there, earlier this week, the regional team was talking. And we have a question that we want you to answer in the chat channel. And this is just going to help us, number one, practice the chat channel, and we'll read all the things. But the question is this. We're all getting ready to go to maybe vacations. You either go down the shore or to the beach, and there's arcades and there's all kinds of fun things to do. So the question is, when you go to the beach or you hit an arcade or do something like that, do you, one, play video games, two, try to get as many tickets as you possibly can to get a prize from the arcade, or three, play the claw machines and try to get a stuffed animal? So in the chat channel, we want to see from you, are you a play video games? Are you a get as many tickets as you possibly can? Or are you a claw machine? And then I'm gonna give you mine when you guys are done. So let's see what you guys got. None of the above. Paula from our regional team was the same. Tickets. Yeah, tickets are good. Avoid the arcade. Yeah. Oh, tickets, games. All right, so we got a little bit of a, okay, so, we got a claw machine, Jen.
Michelle, first rule in wealth building is don't play the claw machine. All right.
So that's the first rule. But we all have some extra spending money. Okay, I'm gonna share with you guys what my answer is. And this is also going to be anybody who is 40 years old and a woman whose husband makes you go to arcades every once in a while to have fun. If you can win a KitchenAid mixer, I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So it's a long story short, we never cash in our tickets, and we finally got enough that Josh was like, hey, we should see what you can get with all these tickets, and I could get a KitchenAid mixer. So there you go. We are investing in arcades, I guess, and our win was a KitchenAid. So not necessarily, but a good way to start. All right, guys, we're gonna get going here. Culin Tate, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Great to be here.
I don't think you knew I was going to start that way, but at least it gets good people thinking and using the chat. So you have some things that you wanted to make sure to share with everyone, especially with the chat channel, because you want them to be engaging with you throughout your presentation, using the chat, raising their hands, asking questions. So why don't you give everybody your ground rules on how you want your presentation to go?
I don't know if there's so much ground rules, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of content here, guys. So feel free if something's confusing, or you had even if you had a specific encounter with the topic, or you have a short-term rental and you have something to contribute, just so I'm not monologuing for 45 minutes. We will obviously save time at the end for more questions, but if there's something coming along and I hit something a little bit too fast, or you want to dive into it a little bit further, please go ahead and put a comment in the chat, and it'll break things up a little bit, give us some time to catch our breaths.
All right, Culin, take us away.
Awesome. All right. My name is Culin Tate, and I'm the host coach. I became the host coach after, 2018. I got involved in real estate investing, and I got involved specifically in short-term rental real estate investing. Ended up getting pretty good at it, and ended up coaching some individual friends and family. And that turned into doing a Keller Williams presentation down in Wilmington, North Carolina, which caused me to organize my thoughts around short-term rental investing, which became the premise for that presentation, became the outline for the Host Coach book. We also podcast. So all of this content, if you want to dive into any of these topics more deeply, the book is available on Amazon, and our podcast is Host Coach, and it's on all the podcast platforms. So that's a way to engage further on any of the topics we cover here today, because we will do them pretty quick. So let's start with a little bit of real estate. We are real estate folks, right? This cabin was the first property. This was a property I purchased for $160,000 back in 2015, and it became my first Airbnb investment. Why I show you this is to demonstrate the power of a short-term rental investment.
We're
This
not
cabin,
seeing your screen.
you're not seeing my screen at all. We did a test one. Do you see the, oops, do you see my first screen?
Not seeing a screen at all.
Okay, we
I
did a
think you
test
might have to
once.
hit share screen again since we stopped it.
Okay, could be. Now are you seeing my slides?
Yep.
Okay. We had tested that once. All right. So yeah, this is my cover slide. This is the cabin I was referring to that I purchased in Shenandoah Valley as a just a family getaway place. I bring it up because this little cabin pays for my primary mortgage on my 6,000 square foot home in Potomac, Maryland. So this little 1,200 square foot cabin pays all of its expenses, its mortgage, its cleaning fees, in addition to pays the mortgage for my primary residence. And that's the type of wealth building and financial freedom that we really want to talk about today for yourselves, right? As a line of income for yourselves as agents, but also as a tool to put in your toolkit to be talking to clients about how they might be able to get a vacation rental getaway place for themselves that pays for itself and additionally throws off enough cash flow to pay for their primary residence. And that's a pretty powerful tool in the toolkit. So yes, we're going to talk about wealth building today. Why? Not just for the sake of accumulating dollars in a bag or a basket or in a bank account, but for financial freedom, right? The freedom to not be worried about, closing that next deal or being concerned about prospecting, to build additional value streams into your business and to give yourself some personal flexibility to do the things that you enjoy. We like to say we want to acquire assets that help pay for our lifestyle. My backstory, I became intrigued with real estate as a teenager. I had a friend, actually two friends. One had very similar stories where one had this little getaway house on the Potomac River that we would go and water ski and hang out in all the time. And other friends' parents had a beach house, and both very similarly had acquired these properties for, $52,000. And that struck me at an early age. Like, where are the deals like that? Will we ever, be able to acquire a property? Where's the deals like that for our generation? And that stuck with me, from my teen years into in 2018. I was with a startup, and I was one of the founders, one of 5 founders, and some of the other founders wanted to sell and get out of it. And so at 48 years old, I was at a career crossroads. I had, a young son. Did I really want to go and do another startup? I've always been a tech entrepreneur, never had a W-2 job, but it's exhausting. You guys know it. You're entrepreneurs yourselves. And so I had that one little cabin, and I put it on Airbnb, and it just started booking like crazy. And it got to the point, I think back then in 2018, it was doing, and I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was just like any other Airbnb host, took some basic pictures, put up a basic listing, all the things we're going to talk about today. I didn't know any of those in 2018 when I started. And that little cabin was doing about $4,000 a month with really no special sauce. And I could do easy math, and I figured, I could multiply that by 2 or 3. And in 2018, ended up jumping into the real estate investment world and acquired actually 3 properties that summer, one on market, one off market, and one through a wholesaler. And so I kind of hit a lot of buckets all kind of at once. But what that also allowed me to do was to begin testing. I had to go out and find some softwares, and I had to find some tools, and I was able to test those tools and develop processes because I had now 4 properties, pretty much in the same area. Most of my properties are in the Shenandoah Valley. And so that allowed me to begin testing things and really developing all the things that we're going to talk about here today. We're going to talk about the opportunity, which is Airbnb. We're going to talk about where to look, where you can find an investment property, how to make it stand out, pricing, automations, and optimization. Short-term rental investing is really three things. One, it's real estate investing. Two, it's the hospitality business. And three, it's e-commerce. And it's that e-commerce part that most hosts really miss, right? We can invest in real estate. The hospitality sort of is forced upon us. Guests ask questions. We have to respond to them. We know we want to be nice. We know we want to get 5-star reviews. But most hosts miss these parts 4 and 5 that we're going to talk about, pricing and automations, which is the e-commerce piece. So hang on for that. You'll be glad you did. So the opportunity. Airbnb now generates more booking revenue than the major hotel brands combined. Why do we care about that? We care about that because Airbnb revenue in 2023 was $10 billion. They generate that revenue on a 15% commission from each booking. The host pays 3%, the guest pays 12%. So that's $66 billion generated by hosts. So that's a big market and something we can materially participate in. We can get out there quickly and, participate in this massive, economic opportunity and benefit from the opportunity that Airbnb has created with its two-way marketplace. In addition to Airbnb's rise in its marketplace, and it's sort of growing from its infancy, right? They've gone public a year or two ago now. It's a household name. Who doesn't know, what an Airbnb is? In addition to the developing of their marketplace, the opportunity also exists due to COVID. People have changed fundamentally how they travel. There's a big shift away from going to the big packed resort, all-inclusive resort. It's not saying people don't do it. In the Disneylands, Disney Worlds, the theme parks where you're packed in with a lot of people, or cruise ships. People have fundamentally found their pods through COVID and are traveling more in groups and, family groups and friend groups. And they're looking for more unique experiences, more than like the cookie cutter hotel. So COVID changed the way we think about travel and the way we travel. It also changed work. So many people are working from home now and realizing that they don't have to work from their home. I get it every week. I have 10 rental properties, short-term rentals, that I own and my wife and I manage together. And every week, multiple times a week, we get that question: how's the internet? Is there a quiet place to work? Can I take a Zoom call? Can I check in early because I've got a Zoom call? So COVID has caused people to be working from home, and they want to work somewhere interesting and unique. And so in our case, they work out of our rental properties. So that has created this demand that's not just a weekend demand. The weekdays are almost as demandful, if that's a word, it's high in demand as weekends once were. So that has really elevated the occupancy potential and the price per night potentials. So I like to say owning just one short-term rental can pay for itself and pay for your primary mortgage and provide cash flow. And my 10 properties gross about $80,000 a year between them. Let's talk about where to find a property. Some people will, if you listen to other experts, you'll hear talk of, what are the top 10 markets, or how do you find the hottest market today, or the hottest medium-sized market. I like to take a different approach. We are talking about financial freedom. So I like to start with, where do you enjoy spending time? What are your interests? Do you like to mountain bike? Do you like to ski? Do you like to hike? Do you like to go to wineries and breweries? So think for a minute, just take a mental break for a second and think, where do you like to go if you've got a 3-day weekend? There exists in every major metropolitan area, be it DC, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Dover, Delaware, a place or many places within a 2 to 3 hour drive from that city where people like to flock. There's going to be multiple places like that. So just think in your mind, where's a place you like to go as a kid, or you go with a spouse or a group of friends? That's how I ended up in the Shenandoah Valley, by the way, is I would go with buddies and we would rent a cabin once or twice a year to go fly fishing. So any place that's got beaches, rivers, mountains, state parks, think about state parks. State parks are always, so if you're stumped with where you like to go, think about state parks near you. State park areas are always great markets. So once we have an idea of a market like that in mind, how do we begin to evaluate the numbers, the dollars and cents? And we do that with a software called AirDNA. This is kind of a busy map, but AirDNA is the data resource for everything short-term rental. They get data from Airbnb, and they get data from Vrbo, they get data from individual users, listings. If you used AirDNA in the past, go back again. AirDNA has changed their business model just very recently. It used to be that you had to know what market you wanted to look at, and then you would buy a subscription to that market. They've changed their model to make it more where you can discover markets. And that's what's happening kind of in this puzzle piece patchwork of a graphic that I have here. All of these dark colored dots are markets that AirDNA has graded as an 80 out of 100. They grade all markets on a scale of 1 to 100, and anything over an 80 gets this dark color. I was just up in Pittsburgh yesterday, and that's why the slide represents Pittsburgh. But you can pull up AirDNA on your computer, and it'll pull up a map of the U.S., and you can kind of zoom around, move around into Pennsylvania or Virginia or wherever you might want, and you can see some of these markets. And what we'll do here is click into one. So this market has an overall score of 100. All right, but what does that mean? What does that mean to me? That 100 comes from the 5 other scores. The one that I think is really most important is this one called investability. And that's the one here on the screen, left-hand side, where it says investability is at a 96 out of 100. Investability is a number that compares the price per square foot for acquisition, right? So is it a $200 a square foot? It's a 1,000 square foot cabin at $200,000 or $200 a square foot, and compares that to the average daily rate. And so when the price per square foot is low and the average daily rate is high, you get a high investability score. So that's a real quick way where you can underwrite, when you can look at a market and see if it's going to be profitable. There's also a couple other things. Rental demand here. Is there demand? Is there revenue growth? I don't worry about the revenue growth that much. Seasonality, this is, a 50 out of 100. So there's going to be some seasonality to this market that we're looking at. I think this is Columbia, maybe South Carolina, I'm not sure. And regulation, this is maybe the second most important factor. If that regulation score is low, like under 50, or it's very low, like 10 or 20, that's going to be something like a New York City or a Paris, where AirDNA has said this market is highly regulated. If I see something like a 70 here, I'm just going to want to put a yellow flag in my head. And when I'm looking at properties, know that regulation, we've all heard about regulation in Airbnb. It can happen at a state level. It can happen at a city or county level. It can also happen at an HOA level. So if you're looking at a market and you've identified a property that you're interested in, find out from the county what their short-term rental stance is, what the rules are. In my market, for example, you just have to get a permit. So you apply for a business license for $50, and they check your in my market, septic, and make sure the place is, safe. And that's the extent of the regulation. And that's typically what you see, is that that counties are seeing short-term rentals as a tax base. So if you get a permit and you apply for a permit, you're now potentially paying an occupancy tax, which, by the way, Airbnb collects and remits on your behalf most times. So the other interesting thing to start to dig into here in this AirDNA data is the average daily rate, and this market's $315 a night, and the occupancy rate. Because we're going to start to build a underwriting P&L for this specific market or even a specific property. AirDNA has a tool where you can actually put in the actual address, and it won't give you just the market. It'll give you comparables based on existing Airbnbs in close proximity to your target property. So what I find is this average daily rate is very accurate. The occupancy rate is very typically an average occupancy rate. 50%, 60%, this is actually pretty high for an average, but we're not here, right? We're not spending our time today to learn how to be average hosts. We're here to learn how to be an extra awesome host, right? At about 50% occupancy, that's break even. All of your margin really comes from obtaining that occupancy above 50% as you get over your fixed costs. And we'll kind of jump into some of those fixed costs here. So looking at the sort of the middle of this table, you've got a mortgage, including taxes, you've got cleaning fees, repairs, insurance, utilities. And you can see that this is actually a page out of the Host Coach book, and it's creating the example of your average host, with an average daily rate and an average occupancy, or actually pretty high occupancy here at 87%. The revenue is, say, $5,000, and the net income is $2,500. Pretty good. But with a little bit of optimization and understanding the things we're going to talk about today, you can get that average daily rate up a little bit. It's maybe a $50 difference, and the occupancy up a little bit. And you can see at the bottom of the screen what a dramatic impact that has on your profit. So instead of $2,500 a month, we're looking at $4,500 a month. Any questions there? That might be a good place to just see if anybody. So I actually have a whole underwriting worksheet that I don't want to switch screens around too much and cause a problem. But if anybody is thinking about underwriting a property or underwriting a market, send me an email, ctate@hostcoach.co, and I'll send you a copy of this underwriting worksheet so that you can dig into the numbers for those numbers folks out there.
So Culin, there is a question in the chat. Stan says, "Hi Culin, great presentation. We have a Myrtle Beach condo rental that is a cash cow. Really only used VRBO in the off season, which we are allowed to do. Can you comment on the pros and cons of Airbnb versus VRBO?"
Yes. So I am at my core a sole platform person, and we're going to get into that. So that could be Airbnb, that could be VRBO. And there are markets like the beach where VRBO has historically been superior, or where people think of Vrbo more than they do, say, Airbnb at the beach. So what I would say to that question, if you're doing well on Vrbo, stick with Vrbo. Master one platform.
Awesome.
And we'll dive into that a little bit. Yeah, was there another question?
Yep. Difference between average and optimized in terms of out-of-pocket cost.
Ooh, most of this is in execution. So it's the things that we're going to be jumping into here. When I tell people I operate my portfolio of 10 at 95% occupancy, usually there's kind of an ooh and a ah, like, wow, that's amazing. It's not that much rocket science. I could take any property to 100%. You could sell any house tomorrow, and for $1. And it's the same kind of thing with Airbnb. I could take any property, any short-term rental, and take it to full occupancy by lowering the price enough, right? But the game becomes that balance of occupancy and price. And we're going to show you exactly how we balance that here in just a second.
Okay. And then do we need to subscribe to AirDNA?
So AirDNA has changed their business model like 5 times this year. They're trying to move towards being more consumer facing. They used to be a little bit more facing the big property management companies. So they do have a free level of access. And then I think their basic subscription starts at like $15 a month. And what they're really trying to do is add tools to keep people in. It used to be that you buy a market, you get the data, and you could leave. they've integrated things like properties available for sale in their tool. So you can be looking at a market and click over on a tab and see the 15 properties that are for sale in that market. Now, as agents, you could use MLS, but it's real convenient. And they're bringing in a lot more data around what other properties are making and ways to filter and really evaluate markets. So there is a free version and there's an inexpensive version. And there's obviously limitations in the features there. If anybody needs to know a little bit more about a market from AirDNA, I have a enterprise level subscription, and just shoot me a note, and I can get you the rest of the data if something's blurred out. That's tends to be what they do.
Right. One final. Hold on, I got another question.
No, love the questions. Keep them coming.
Have you used Price Labs to come up with your pricing, or just AirDNA?
So AirDNA is, well, all these tools are starting to kind of get commingled and grab features from one another. AirDNA, think about it this way. AirDNA is your research tool. And we'll get to Price Labs here in just a minute.
Okay. And then there's one more question that just came in. In the areas where we are looking, we are finding lots of regulations from city and HOA to avoid Airbnb. Is this a new trend, or has it been like that since you started? And then we'll get back to that.
Is this person talking about Poconos, maybe?
I'm not sure.
It smells of a Poconos question.
Yes, with capitals, all capitals.
All right. So what we're finding in generality is that counties, particularly rural counties, we're excluding New York cities and the urban places, where there's, in the urban settings, there's this, well, A, there's the hotel lobby, and B, there's this idea that maybe short-term rentals are replacing affordable housing for residents. When we get into the getaway markets, it's the getaway markets, the counties are realizing what they're not trying to outlaw. They want people to come to whatever the state park is, right? It's supportive of their economy. And so what they're doing is we are seeing increased permitting regulation. So not banning Airbnb, but asking operators to apply for a business permit and then putting occupancy taxes in place. So we are seeing a growth in that. Conversely, that's why I said it smelled like a Poconos question. Poconos has been a vacation destination for so long. It was developed, and the HOAs, got their hand in the pie early. So, there are HOAs where they're charging you to, every car that comes through the gate, or every guest, needs to be registered. And some of those fees can be high. I think there's people on this call. I think I saw one or two that are familiar with that market. There are places in the Poconos that don't have as much HOA regulation, but just be real careful as you're looking at properties what the regulations are from that HOA level and the costs. You might just say, oh, they're allowed. Look beyond, and particularly in the Poconos, look beyond, is it allowed or not? But are there additional fees imposed by the community?
I think we're good. Let me double check. Right. Yep, and Lancaster City. Yep. So was just answering to that. Yep. All right, let's get going.
All right, so let's talk about actually creating the listing. We've now purchased the place, and we've moved into from finding your where to making it pop, which is the second pillar of short-term rental investing. We hit this single platform. I'm a big believer in single platform. Master, one place. You're going to show up. The idea sometimes becomes, well, if it's free to be on 3 different platforms, aren't I going to get 3 times the views? You're not. You're going to end up on page 5, and nobody's going to see it on 3 different platforms. And so mastering one platform, being on page 1, it's like a front page ad versus being on page 15, in the newspaper. You're actually going to get more views by mastering one platform. The next thing we like to talk about is macro and micro amenities. Macro amenities are things like a view. You can't build a view. If you can buy a view, right? A lake nearby, or the entrance to a national park nearby. Those are macro amenities. Micro amenities are the small things that you do to stand out. Hanging basket chairs, fire pits, game tables, all those little things that you can add into a listing, so that when somebody is looking to go, to the Poconos, or whatever that neighborhood is, looking to go on a ski trip, and they're looking through listings, what are the things that jump out? Every place has a bed, right? So we're looking for something for the kids. We're looking for high-speed internet to work. We're looking for all those little things that you can add into your listing. And I keep saying hanging basket chairs. It's anybody who knows me or follows the podcast, usually we talk about hanging basket chairs a lot, because my wife, Danielle, loves them. Literally, it goes back to, we were booking a place in like Amsterdam years ago, and it had this cool porch. We're looking at a dozen places, and this one place has a cool porch and this hanging basket chair. She's like, I want to sit there and drink a glass of champagne. So just a little thing like that can make the difference between somebody picking your listing versus one of the other 17 on the page. Decor, I'll show some pictures of decor in a minute to make things stand out. I probably don't need to say this to a group of real estate professionals, but professional HDR photography will make your listing. Unlike a real estate listing where the photos have a lifespan of maybe only 2 weeks or 3 weeks while the property is up for sale, in the short-term rental, you're using those photos for years. They're also the only visual aid to get people to make the purchase decision, right? So when you're selling a house, the visual aid is to get them to come see the house in person. In the short-term rental space, the visual aid is where they're making their buying decision from. So this is an example of one of my cabins. It's called Shenandoah Gem. You can kind of tell the photography is really bright. It's that HDR look. When somebody is on a page of 18 other listings and one set of photos is just that really ultra crisp, ultra bright, they're driven, compelled to click on it. So decor, we like to say rustic on the outside, crate and barrel on the inside. This sort of bottom right-hand photo here, you can see we use a lot of like contrasting, like bright blue or bright green velvet to contrast all that heavy wood, stainless appliances, all that kind of stuff. So this is a good example, and I'll refer to the same property in a couple, some other amenities. There's gas fireplace there, there's a big TV, poker table up in the upper left-hand corner you can't see. So just layering in things for visual and things that people don't have at home. Little things like we get this all the time. Oh, do you have a grill? I have a grill at my house. Some people, people who live in the city that's an amenity, just to have a little charcoal or gas propane grill or a little fire table or fire pit. We do all of those things and they're very inexpensive to add into, make it pop. All right, we're really getting into the special sauce now. This is where we're going to talk about pricing for occupancy, and we do that as the listener had brought up. Do you use Price Labs? Price Labs is our go-to, what we use for third-party dynamic pricing. We have to start by understanding, what is Airbnb? Airbnb is a marketplace, and that marketplace is driven by an algorithm, right? It's trying to match buyers and sellers. Just like Google is a search engine, Airbnb is a search engine. And we know that guests only look at 3 or 4 properties. I think it's like 18 pages, something like that is the data, before they make a purchase decision. So the chances of being on page 2 or page 3 and getting a lot of bookings is much lower. So we really need to understand, what does the algorithm want? What does Airbnb as a business care about? It cares about 2 things. One, guest satisfaction. Just like Google doesn't want to show spammy pages, Airbnb wants to show places listed by hosts that are going to take good care of the guest, right? So that they come back and use more Airbnb properties. And so that's your 5-star reviews. That's your hospitality. It's not too hard to do. It's your cleaning. The other thing that they care about is making their money, right? So if Airbnb shows a property and that property's calendar is blocked because it's, being sold on another platform, and they continually show that property and it's continually blocked and it doesn't book, where's it going to go? It's going to go to the bottom. It's going to go down. It's going to get pushed down. So we improve our ranking by improving our price, finding the right price for each night, having our calendars open, not being on multiple platforms, and it's just a success cycle. better ranking gives you more visibility and more views, which gives you more bookings, which gives you higher ranking. And it just all kind of plays together. So understanding that we're trying what the algorithm is looking for and finding that right price for each night. So I'm going to skip forward here just for a second. We'll come back to it. This is the calendar for October of 2021. I should probably update that, of Shenandoah Gem, that property I showed 2 minutes ago. In a peak season in October, which is kind of fall leaf peeping season, what I want to illustrate is the range in prices here. On October 27th, there's a low point of $327 a night, which that's a good number, right? This is a peak month. But it goes as high, and that's a Wednesday night. It goes as high as, on the first weekend of the month, almost $797 a night. I can tell you guys, remember when I said I was experimenting? I started to learn with these tools and was able to experiment when I had a few. I never would have had the courage, the gall to throw up a number like $800 a night. But the data doesn't lie. So the way Price Labs works is they're getting demand data from Airbnb. They don't know what color the leaves are on October 8th and 9th. They don't know if Taylor Swift's coming into town for a concert. They just know that searches for a given day of the week are up 300%. So you provide Price Labs a base price, call it $300, and it turns that price up for you when there's high demand. Conversely, it will turn it down for you next Tuesday night when there's not a lot of people looking. So kind of going back here, most hosts miss this. And I say most, I mean most. I think Price Labs has 20 odd thousand customers across, however many million, 2.3 million hosts there are in the US. And this is also a good time to interject. Some people say, I've heard so much about Airbnb. Everybody's doing it. Is it too late? And it's not, for this simple fact that nobody is using the third party, not nobody, a very small portion of hosts understand what we just talked about, the algorithm, and understanding pricing for occupancy. What they usually do is they just pick a number, $200 a night, and they slap that up on the listing, which is going to underprice their weekend. So all the weekends are going to get sold real quick at $200 a night when they probably could have gone for $400 a night. And it's going to overprice their weekdays. So they're going to sit empty. And that's why when we looked at AirDNA a little while ago, and I said most markets that you look at are going to be about 50% occupied. That's because those hosts are using flat pricing. Maybe they're going in and turning up some holiday weekends here or there. But with short-term rentals, we need to find the market. We need to meet the market every day. Just like selling a house, you have to meet the market. The neighbor's house was worth $1 million last year, but that's not this year. Maybe the house is worth $900,000 because that's today's market. In the short-term rental space, we're finding and meeting that market every single day. So the value is what the group is willing to pay for it. They might pay that same house $800 a night in October, but next Tuesday night, that same house, Shenandoah Gem, you might be able to book for $150 a night. But I'm going to get it booked and I'm going to get it sold because honestly, $150 for the night is more than zero, right? We really have very small marginal expenses, right? That is the economic term, marginal revenues, marginal costs, right? We're paying the mortgage. We're paying the utility bill. We're paying the internet. Our housekeepers, that's a pass through to our guests. So whatever our housekeeper is charging us, there's a fee that we pass through. That has nothing to do with our average daily rate. That gets passed through directly to the guest group. Okay, so do the guest open the front door 3 times and the refrigerator 4 times? Sure, but that's like 25 cents worth of electricity. So we want to find a buyer for every single night because we make that $150 and because we're showing Airbnb that we're booking and closing every night. So they're making their money and their algorithm will reward you, the host, and your listing with higher search placement. And that, guys, is really where the magic happens, is in this dynamic pricing. That's the e-commerce part that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that most people missed, or most hosts miss that e-commerce part. So yeah, this is a screen cap from my Airbnb app. We run it, and this is a little bit dated. We're probably down to like 92, 93% right now, just because we're coming out of the winter months. But we're at 95% occupancy, an average daily rate $300 a night, and we book 12 guest groups, through each month. All right, so the next question often then becomes, well, I don't know if I've got time for this. Is this really time consuming? The solution there is another software as a service, subscription-based service called Hospitable. This isn't the most interesting slide, but this is a quick view of what Hospitable does. Again, this is a subscription-based service. I think it's about $30 a month. It changes, it gets less expensive. And what this does is automates 95% of your guest messaging, right? Somebody books, they get a message. Thank you, Bill, for booking. You're confirmed. Here's your dates. They have a lot of touch points that you can automate with your guests. The two that we find the most important are the message that the guest gets as soon as they book. We call it the concierge message. And that's, think about it, when you plan a trip, like you're going to, Orlando. You book your flights, you book your hotel, and then it's, now what? What are we going to do? How are we going to fill our time? So what I do is I write this concierge message that says, you're coming to Shenandoah Valley. Here's our favorite restaurants. Here's our favorite breakfast place. Don't miss the petting zoo with the behind the scenes tour. Just think about if you had a good friend that was coming to visit your city and you weren't going to be there, all the things you would tell them to do. That also begins to set off the 5-star review process, because we get that message back where people say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You planned our whole trip for us. Your suggestions were right on. And then the other message is 5 days before they check in, kind of the nitty gritty. What's the address? What's the Wi-Fi code? What's the front door code? Anything specific about the house, how to, use the fireplace, those types of things. Hospitable has also just introduced an AI feature, which handles, even more of these inquiries. So I'm at the front door and I don't have the code, or we have grills and I don't know that we do a good job telling people in what property is propane and charcoal. So you can set up a rule. It's called answers. And if anybody says anything about grill, they're going to get a canned answer back that says, the details. So that's further automating the time. So the only questions we interface with guests about are these real specific things. What color is your blender? My favorite feature of Hospitable is it actually automates your review for you also. I got really tired writing the same review, hi, Bill was a great guest. So Hospitable really cuts out the operational time.
Culin, we have a question in the chat. What do you do for deposits, etc., to prevent a group from trashing your place? Airbnb tends to be more popular with the younger generation.
Yep, good question. That has evolved a little bit over time as well, where Airbnb used to have deposits, and the way it works now is Airbnb was very sensitive to that problem, right? Hosts were concerned. First and foremost, I don't put anything in my property that's like an antique or has sentimental value. There's nothing in any one of my properties that costs more than a one-night stay. A 50-inch TV at Walmart now is $320, right? So first, we don't put a ton of expensive things. Secondly, guests are really good. It's kind of like, because of the two-way review system, guests are generally pretty good. They're generally excellent, to be honest with you. I mean, and the third measure, and this is the most important, probably getting to the question, is Airbnb baked into every reservation at no additional cost has something called air cover, which means if somebody breaks something and you ask them to pay for it and they don't, and you have photos, they will reimburse you.
Airbnb will reimburse you.
Yes, under the program called Air Cover.
Do you have to pay extra for that?
I'm sorry? No, nobody pays extra.
Okay. Eduardo said, how do we think about optimizing occupancy plus profitability when thinking about what is best between renting weekly or weekends or daily or a combination of these. We currently only rent by week.
So it sounds like a beach property. And that's very typical for beach properties to be, Saturday to Saturday. And I don't object to that, particularly in season. So I've coached people with beach properties where, Memorial to Labor Day, there'll be a 7-day minimum. And outside of that, we'll go to a more typical short-term rental minimum. I find that a 2-night minimum is the most profitable minimum. Again, let's get out of the beach example and just think about something not at the beach. Well, even the beach, like I go visit friends in Oak Island, once or twice a year, and I'm going for the weekend. If I'm only going for the weekend, you can't make me stay 3 days. I'm just not going to see your property, right? So if you have a 3 or a 4-night minimum and somebody is searching for a weekend, you're never going to be shown. They're never even going to see your place. So to answer that question, if that person's at the beach and they're in, a high season and they're comfortable with the 7-day minimum, then stick with that. But outside of season, I would recommend, to maximize revenue, a 2-night minimum. Now, people might book for 3 or 4. It happens. We have a 2-night minimum. People book, particularly in the summer, for 4 or 5 days. But I can't make that guest book for 5 days. They have to have determined that that's where they wanted to start to begin with.
Okay, I think that's
Other question?
Yep.
All right. And yeah, so that's operations. I call it a bathroom business. It all takes place for the most part on my phone. I've got the Airbnb app. Like, you can actually kind of see there's like Airbnb notification right there. How did Mackenzie do as a guest? Well, I'm not going to worry about how Mackenzie did as a guest because I know that Hospitable is going to write her a review. So I just put the phone back down. And that was my, I just did my Airbnb business while doing this presentation. So automated messaging, the app, automated messaging with Hospitable. One thing from an operations perspective that you really can't overlook is to have an amazing housekeeper and an amazing relationship with that housekeeper. They're going to be making the property. They need to take ownership. And all my housekeepers are like this. They love what they do, right? They're not maids. They take ownership in our properties. They want them to be perfect. And the housekeeper and the cleanliness of the place is, again, a big part of that 5-star review. If I walk into a place and it is spotless, and I open the refrigerator and the light is out, I don't think twice of it. I don't even mention it. Maybe I mention it to the host. However, if I walk in and there's dog hair on the couch and there's stains in the sink and I open the refrigerator and the light's out, I'm going to get a message that says, I can't stay here. I can't, the light's out in my refrigerator. And literally, that's not an exaggeration of a situation. So your housekeeper is your eyes and ears on the property's maintenance, and they're there to make it sparkling perfect so that guests can have an amazing 5-star experience. From there's a couple other vendors you want to build out, anything from a renovation team to it's nice to have a handy person that can reaffix the screen door if it falls off, that kind of stuff. And we want to monitor our reviews. So we always read through our reviews to see where we can make improvements. It happens where people say the pots and pans are starting to look dated, right? And my housekeeper doesn't do dishes, so we don't necessarily get that from them. But listen to your guests. The internet was slow, or the chair was wobbly, or the pots and pans need to be replaced. So we get good feedback also from our guests. So that's sort of the operations stuff. So what gets measured gets managed, and we measure through another software. By the way, there's no links to any of these. This is the data stack. This is the tech stack that I use. If you heard anybody in the last year say Airbnb's dead, or I used to make a lot of money on Airbnb, or nobody's making money on Airbnb anymore, it's because they're not making money. Why aren't they making money? We could all probably answer this question through this presentation, which they're not getting bookings because they're not getting views. They're not getting views because they're low in search placement. So this is actually a screen cap from RankBreeze of one of my properties. And I'll explain what's going on here. As we've gone from 2022 and 2023, which were kind of peak years, into 2024, demand is normalized. So through COVID, my prices were going up, 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 up on all my properties. Well, we're seeing demand normalize a little bit. And in this case, one of my properties was sort of falling into this, 60th position range, right? This left side of the screen. These two red lines represent the highlighted bit at the bottom where I've taken my base price in Price Labs from $265 a night. I've had to drop it $10 a night. But look at the result. It then took me from a 60 position up to, a little better than 20, let's call it 18th, 15th position there. So if you don't know what to look for, if you don't know that you're in this 60th position, all of a sudden you're not getting views, your position's falling further, and you're not getting bookings. And this is what's happened to so many hosts who, are now complaining that the market has shifted. It did. And all I did to adjust to that was a $10 price difference. And I went from the 60th position back to the 15th position. And I'm now not going out of business.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Jamie, it kind of goes along with that. What do you think about the longevity and sustainability of the Airbnb platform?
I buy a lot of stock. I think Airbnb, and I'll tell you, this is actually my stock analogy. I think Airbnb is at the point that Netflix was at when Netflix was still shipping CDs. I think it is that much fundamental for growth.
Okay. So very sustainable. Roxanne said, do you allow pets in your rentals, such as dogs and cats? And do you set a limit on how many pets?
Great question. We did a podcast episode about amenities, and my wife Danielle did these numbers, so I won't get them exactly right, but it's something like 62% of people polled wanted to travel with their pet, and only like 30% of the listings were pet friendly. So that's the general. Specifically, it's property dependent. I have 10 properties, most of which are pet friendly because it makes a huge difference. People want to travel with their pets. And a couple, the property just isn't right for it. One is that Shenandoah gem that I showed you, because it's a custom built house, and the floors are too soft, basically, is the problem. It's soft softwood floors. Another property, we just have a ton of carpet. When we buy and renovate, we'll go in and we'll take out carpet and put an LVP to make it specifically pet friendly.
Okay.
And yes, you can charge a pet fee. You can make that up in Price Labs. You can $10 or $20 or $30, $50. And you can set a limit. And I think we set our limit is like 2. And we do other things. We have I mentioned the LVP. Our pet friendly places, we lean into it. We'll leave out some little dog treats or biscuits. We'll have a basket. We started doing you put blankets, throw blankets in a basket for people to sit on the couch. We have a basket like that with pet blankets, and they have milk bones on them. You can tell it's the blankets for the pet. So, and people love that. People love it when you compliment their kids. People love when you compliment their pets even more.
It's because the pets love them no matter what.
Right.
Next question is, how did you come up with the $10 price reduction action? Was it recommended by Price Lab, meaning your property was just above the area price average? Just want to understand how you knew pricing was the issue.
Well, pricing is the big stick, right? I do optimizations with people. Pricing is the big lever, right? I knew that I was already pet friendly. I knew that I had great reviews. I knew that my policies and instant booking policies were all set correctly. I'd already done those things. And what was left was a price reduction. And where did I pick $10? I picked it out of thin air, literally. I just said $10 and it did the trick. I'm actually working on a property right now where I'm doing the same thing. I pulled $10 out of thin air and it didn't do the trick. So I got to do it again to maintain that occupancy.
Next question is, Are you concerned about security of your properties? How do you address that within your business?
Security of the property. Are we back to like parties? Are we back to damage?
Maybe people breaking in when it's not occupied, both. Yeah, both. Wayne said both.
Sure. We use digital deadbolts on all of our properties. You know, I'm not there, so I'm kind of not worried about my personal, you know, my family, right? Like somebody broke in my house, I'd be really concerned that, you know, my family was in danger. It is just a property. So we also do use, not everywhere, but we have ring or blink security cameras. There are a whole host. We've got a whole episode on the podcast called Risk Management. There's all kinds of cool things out there. There's sensors that can detect how many phones are in a house. There's sensors that can detect the noise levels within a house. There's sensors that can detect cigarette or marijuana smoke within the house. So there are some technological, barriers, tools that to help us protect the property, from cameras to these sensors, to insurance, and Airbnb, to locks, and to, it's just an asset.
Yeah. Culin, this was a lot of information that you shared with us today. Thank you so much. I know you have, oh, there it is. I know you have ways for everyone to stay connected with you. So if you guys want to go ahead and get that QR code, Culin's information is up there as well. We'll make sure that this information is also posted in the Facebook group. Missy, if you can drop that in the chat for anybody who is not part of our wealth building Facebook group. You can watch the recording of today's call in that group. We upload the videos there and any other wealth building things that we're sharing. And just I really appreciate your time today, Culin. I feel like this group is going to want to have you back in the future to dive a little bit deeper into all of this content. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, team. It was good to see everybody. We are going to be taking the next month off. It is the week of 4th of July is when our Wealth Building Wednesday would fall. So we will be taking July off, and then we will be back to Wealth Building Wednesdays in August. And we are excited. We've already got our guests lined up. So join the Facebook group, stay in contact over the summer, and can't wait to see what y'all come up with over the next couple of months. Thanks so much and have a good one, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.